Now, with the global race for critical minerals access heating up, attention is once again on the Arctic and the resource it has to offer. And of course, the melting ice shelf there are presenting all kinds of opportunity. Marianne Coninsx is the former EU ambassador for the Arctic and joins us now. Marianne, thank you for joining us. I want to share an anecdote with you and the viewers. I was in the Kremlin in the middle of 2014. I was there for a function, but people don't need to hear that. But I was sitting next to a gentleman called Artur Chilingarov, who I think you might be aware. Artur Chilingarov is the man who in 2007 was part of a Russian expedition that planted a flag on the shelf beneath the ice floe. The Russians have been at this for a very long time, Marianne. Why is it only now, with the Trump threats to Greenland, that actually the West is beginning to wake up once again to the threat posed by other nations in this region?
Yes, thank you. The man you mentioned, Sharingarov, I met him personally in 2018 in Russia. Now, the Arctic is becoming at the center, I would say, of the world attention. The Arctic is becoming a hot topic. And the reason should be actually that the Arctic is warming up, the climate change, the Arctic is warming up much faster than the rest of the world and has a major effect on the global warming, is causing, for example, extreme weather events, and that should be of concern. But the interest of the Arctic, and not least maybe also provoked by President Trump's provocative statements regarding to Greenland, is mainly because of what you mentioned, the geoeconomic reasons. Because of the warming up, the rich natural resources in the Arctic are becoming much more available. And I'm speaking here about increased fishing, but particularly shipping opportunities along the northern sea route linking Europe with Asia on the northern Russian border, but particularly the natural resources, the rich critical minerals, which are so key for Europe's economic development, for the green transition. And therefore, there is an increased interest also for major geopolitical players, not only of the US, but also from non-Arctic states, major ones like particularly China, and not at least because of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. This has a major effect on the security situation in the Arctic.
But I mean, as you and I are both articulating, this threat and the observance of this threat has been around a long time. The Russians were way ahead of the game. The Americans seem to be catching up. Now, many Europeans may not find Mr. Trump's threats to Greenland, to Denmark, to their taste. I understand that. But he's right. The EU and Denmark, to a certain degree, have allowed others, the Russians, the Chinese, to get ahead in the game in preparing for these changing climate conditions and preparing for these extra routes and preparing for the access to these critical minerals. We really need to get ourselves in gear on this side of the world, don't we?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the reasons why President Trump, who actually in the beginning wanted to buy Greenland, which is certainly absurd, but now even expressed that he wants to control Greenland itself, it's mainly for, I would say, the strategic position of Greenland, which is important for US defense. And also for the rare minerals which are in Greenland. But therefore, you don't have to own the country. Greenland is the owner of its own territory, and it is that which should be accepted. And the same aims of strengthening security and have access to minerals, for example, in Greenland, can be achieved without trying to own Greenland itself. There is not a wakening up. If there has been a wakening up in the past, in the recent past, it has been a wakening up of NATO, because until, I would say, the Russian invasion of Russia in Ukraine, there was no really awareness of the security threat in the Arctic by NATO. It was neglecting its northern flank. But due to the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and particularly thanks to the new membership of Sweden and Finland, there is a strengthening security force from NATO in Northern Europe. So I wouldn't say there is a wakening up. The European Union is perfectly conscious of the importance of the Arctic, already since many, many years, since it has its Arctic policy, but it has become more important because of the geo-economic and the geopolitical security reasons.
Marianne, it's Karen jumping in. I just was astounded, I've got to say, by the numbers that the Arctic has in terms of significance to the Russian economy. And we know there are huge sanctions on Russia in 2024, effectively 11% of exports and 7.5% of GDP, which is a fairly significant slice of the pie. Sanctions, though, have come into the mix, and I gather they've slowed a couple of key projects down, Arctic LNG 2 and also the Vostok oil. What do you make of the role of sanctions from here in terms of limiting the revenues that Russia can derive from the region?
Yeah, you rightly point to the fact that the Russian Arctic represent half of the whole territory of the Arctic and is of crucial strategic interest for Russia, economically and security. Economically, and you rightly pointed to the fact that it's an enormous source of GNP because of the extraction of energy resources and others, particularly also the use of the northern sea route. It's enormous income for Russia, and with this income and despite the sanctions, Russia has been able to finance 1/3 of the cost of the war in Ukraine with these exports. A lot of them still, there are loopholes in the sanctions, and therefore very glad to hear that, for example, yesterday, the European Union and others took the 17th package of measure, particularly to try to counter the shadow float. But the sanctions are having an effect, but should go further. Because it is touching the Russian economy. But there is the other aspect of security, because Russia's northern fleet is in the Arctic, all its nuclear powers are in the Arctic, and this is a serious threat for Europe.